The Voyages of Doctor Dolittle. Part 3. The first chapter. The third man. That same week we began our preparations for the voyage. Joe, the muscle man, had the curlew moved down the river and tied it up along the river wall, so it would be more handy for loading. And for 3 whole days we carried provisions down to our beautiful new boat and stowed them away. I was surprised to find how roomy and big she was inside. There were 3 little cabins, a saloon or dining room, and underneath all this, a big place called the hold where the food and extra sails and other things were kept. I think Joe must have told everybody in the town about our coming voyage, because there was always a regular crowd watching us when we brought the things down to put aboard. And of course sooner or later old Matthew Mugg was bound to turn up. "My goodness, Tommy," said he, as he watched me carrying on some sacks of flour, "but that's a pretty boat. Where might the doctor be going to this voyage?" "We're going to Spider Monkey Island," I said proudly. "And be you the only one the doctor's taking along?" "Well, he has spoken of wanting to take another man," I said, "but so far he hasn't made up his mind." Matthew grunted, then squinted up at the graceful masts of the curlew. "You know, Tommy," said he, "if it wasn't for my rheumatism I've half a mind to come with the doctor myself. There's something about a boat standing ready to sail that always did make me feel venturesome and travelish like. What's that stuff in the cans you're taking on?" "This is treacle," I said. 20 pounds of treacle." "My goodness," he sighed, turning away sadly. "That makes me feel more like going with you than ever, but my rheumatism is that bad I can't hardly." I didn't hear any more, for Matthew had moved off, still mumbling, into the crowd that stood about the wharf. The clock in Puddleby Church struck noon and I turned back, feeling very busy and important, to the task of loading. But it wasn't very long before someone else came along and interrupted my work. This was a huge, big, burly man with a red beard and tattoo marks all over his arms. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, spat twice onto the river wall and said, "Boy, where's the skipper?" "The skipper, who do you mean?" I asked. "The captain." "Where's the captain, of this craft?" he said, pointing to the curlew. "Oh, you mean the doctor," said I. "Well, he isn't here at present." At that moment the doctor arrived with his arms full of notebooks and butterfly nets and glass cases and other natural history things. The big man went up to him, respectfully touching his cap. "Good morning, Captain," said he. "I heard you was in need of hands for a voyage." "My name's Ben Butcher, able seaman." "I am very glad to know you," said the doctor. "But I'm afraid I shan't be able to take on any more crew." "Why, but Captain," said the able seaman, "you surely ain't going to face deep sea weather with nothing more than this bit of a lad to help you, and with a cutter that big." The doctor assured him that he was, but the man didn't go away. He hung around and argued. He told us he had known of many ships being sunk through undermanning. He got out what he called his certificate paper, which said what a good sailor he was, and implored us, if we valued our lives, to take him. But the doctor was quite firm, polite but determined, and finally the man walked sorrowfully away, telling us he never expected to see us alive again. Callers of one sort and another kept us quite busy that morning. The doctor had no sooner gone below to stow away his notebooks than another visitor appeared upon the gangplank. This was a most extraordinary looking black man. The only other Negroes I had seen had been in circuses, where they wore feathers and bone necklaces and things like that. But this one was dressed in a fashionable frock coat with an enormous bright red cravat. On his head was a straw hat with a gay band, and over this he held a large green umbrella. He was very smart in every respect except his feet. He wore no shoes or socks. "Pardon me," said he, bowing elegantly, "but is this the ship of the physician Dolittle?" "Yes," I said. "Did you wish to see him?" "I did, if it will not be discommodious," he answered. "Who shall I say it is?" "I am Bumpo Kababo, Crown Prince of Jolajinki." I ran downstairs at once and told the doctor. How fortunate! Cried John Dolittle. My old friend Bumpo. Well, he's studying at Oxford, you know. How good of him to come all this way to call on me. And he tumbled up the ladder to greet his visitor. The strange black man seemed to be overcome with joy when the doctor appeared and shook him warmly by the hand. News reached me, he said, that you were about to sail upon a voyage. I hastened to see you before your departure. I am sublimely ecstasied that I did not miss you. You very nearly did miss us, said the doctor. As it happened, we were delayed somewhat in getting the necessary number of men to sail our boat. If it hadn't been for that, we would have been gone 3 days ago. How many men does your ship's company yet require? Asked Bumpo. Only one, said the doctor, but it is so hard to find the right one. Methinks I detect something of the finger of destination in this, said Bumpo. How would I do? Splendidly, said the doctor. But what about your studies? You can't very well just go off and leave your university career to take care of itself, you know. I need a holiday, said Bumpo. Even had I not gone with you, I intended at the end of this term to take a 3 months absconsion, but besides, I shall not be neglecting my edification if I accompany you. Before I left Jolliginki, my august father, the king, told me to be sure and travel plenty. You are a man of great studiosity. To see the world in your company is an opportunity not to be sneezed upon. No, indeed. How did you like the life at Oxford? Asked the doctor. Oh, passably, said Bumpo. I liked it all except the algebra and the shoes. The algebra hurt my head and the shoes hurt my feet. I threw the shoes over a wall as soon as I got out of the college quadrilateral this morning, and the algebra I am happily forgetting very fast. I like Cicero, yes, I think Cicero's fine, so simultaneous. By the way, they tell me his son is rowing for our college next year. Charming fellow. The doctor looked down at the black man's huge bare feet thoughtfully a moment. Well, he said slowly, there is something in what you say, Bumpo, about getting education from the world as well as from the college. And if you are really sure that you want to come, we shall be delighted to have you. Because, to tell you the truth, I think you are exactly the man we need. The second chapter. Goodbye. 2 days after that we had all in readiness for our departure. On this voyage Jip begged so hard to be taken that the doctor finally gave in and said he could come. Polynesia and Chi-Chi were the only other animals to go with us. Dab-Dab was left in charge of the house and the animal family we were to leave behind. Of course, as is always the way, at the last moment we kept remembering things we had forgotten, and when we finally closed the house up and went down the steps to the road, we were all burdened with armfuls of odd packages. Halfway to the river, the doctor suddenly remembered that he had left the stock pot boiling on the kitchen fire. However, we saw a blackbird flying by who nested in our garden, and the doctor asked her to go back for us and tell Dab-Dab about it. Down at the river wall we found a great crowd waiting to see us off. Standing right near the gangplank were my mother and father. I hoped that they would not make a scene, or burst into tears or anything like that. But as a matter of fact they behaved quite well for parents. My mother said something about being sure not to get my feet wet, and my father just smiled a crooked sort of smile, patted me on the back and wished me luck. Goodbyes are awfully uncomfortable things, and I was glad when it was over and we passed on to the ship. We were a little surprised not to see Matthew Mugg among the crowd. We had felt sure that he would be there, and the doctor had intended to give him some extra instructions about the food for the animals we had left at the house. At last, after much pulling and tugging, we got the anchor up and undid a lot of mooring ropes. Then the curlew began to move gently down the river with the outrunning tide, while the people on the wall cheered and waved their handkerchiefs. We bumped into 1 or 2 other boats getting out into the stream, and at one sharp bend in the river we got stuck on a mud bank for a few minutes. But though the people on the shore seemed to get very excited at these things, the doctor did not appear to be disturbed by them in the least. These little accidents will happen in the most carefully regulated voyages, he said as he leaned over the side and fished for his boots which had got stuck in the mud while we were pushing off. Sailing is much easier when you get out into the open sea. There aren't so many silly things to bump into. For me indeed it was a great and wonderful feeling, that getting out into the open sea, when at length we passed the little lighthouse at the mouth of the river and found ourselves free of the land. It was all so new and different, just the sky above you and sea below. This ship, which was to be our house and our street, our home and our garden, for so many days to come, seemed so tiny in all this wide water, so tiny and yet so snug, sufficient, safe. I looked around me and took in a deep breath. The doctor was at the wheel steering the boat which was now leaping and plunging gently through the waves. I had expected to feel seasick at first but was delighted to find that I didn't. Bumpo had been told off to go downstairs and prepare dinner for us. Chi-Chi was coiling up ropes in the stern and laying them in neat piles. My work was fastening down the things on the deck so that nothing could roll about if the weather should grow rough when we got further from the land. Jip was up in the peak of the boat with ears cocked and nose stuck out like a statue, so still his keen old eyes keeping a sharp lookout for floating wrecks, sandbars, and other dangers. Each one of us had some special job to do, part of the proper running of a ship. Even old Polynesia was taking the sea's temperature with the doctor's bath thermometer tied on the end of a string, to make sure there were no icebergs near us. As I listened to her swearing softly to herself because she couldn't read the pesky figures in the fading light, I realized that the voyage had begun in earnest and that very soon it would be night, my first night at sea. The third chapter. Our troubles begin. Just before supper time Bumpo appeared from downstairs and went to the doctor at the wheel. "A stowaway in the hold, sir," said he in a very business-like seafaring voice. "I just discovered him, behind the flour bags." "Dear me," said the doctor. "What a nuisance. Stubbins, go down with Bumpo and bring the man up. I can't leave the wheel just now." So Bumpo and I went down into the hold, and there, behind the flour bags, plastered in flour from head to foot, we found a man. After we had swept most of the flour off him with a broom, we discovered that it was Matthew Mugg. We hauled him upstairs sneezing and took him before the doctor. "Why, Matthew," said John Dolittle, "what on earth are you doing here?" "The temptation was too much for me, doctor," said the cat's meat man. "You know I've often asked you to take me on voyages with you and you never would. Well, this time, knowing that you needed an extra man, I thought if I stayed hid till the ship was well at sea you would find I came in handy like and keep me. But I had to lie so doubled up, for hours, behind them flour bags, that my rheumatism came on something awful. I just had to change my position, and of course just as I stretched out my legs along comes this here African cook of yours and sees my feet sticking out. Don't this ship rolls something awful. How long has this storm been going on? I reckon this damp sea air wouldn't be very good for my rheumatics." "No, Matthew, it really isn't. You ought not to have come. You are not in any way suited to this kind of a life. I'm sure you wouldn't enjoy a long voyage a bit. We'll stop in at Penzance and put you ashore. Bumpo, please go downstairs to my bunk, and listen, in the pocket of my dressing gown you'll find some maps. Bring me the small one with blue pencil marks at the top. I know Penzance is over here on our left somewhere. But I must find out what lighthouses there are before I change the ship's course and sail inshore." "Very good, sir," said Bumpo, turning round smartly and making for the stairway. "Now Matthew," said the doctor, "you can take the coach from Penzance to Bristol. And from there it is not very far to Puddleby, as you know. Don't forget to take the usual provisions to the house every Thursday, and be particularly careful to remember the extra supply of herrings for the baby minks." While we were waiting for the maps, Chi-Chi and I set about lighting the lamps, a green one on the right side of the ship, a red one on the left and a white one on the mast. At last we heard someone trundling on the stairs again and the doctor said, "Ah, here's Bumpo with the maps at last." But to our great astonishment it was not Bumpo alone that appeared but 3 people. "Good Lord, deliver us! Who are these?" cried John Dolittle. "2 more stowaways, sir," said Bumpo, stepping forward briskly. "I found them in your cabin hiding under the bunk. 1 woman and 1 man, sir. Here are the maps." "This is too much," said the doctor feebly. "Who are they? I can't see their faces in this dim light." "Strike a match, Bumpo. You could never guess who it was. It was Luke and his wife. Mrs. Luke appeared to be very miserable and seasick. They explained to the doctor that after they had settled down to live together in the little shack out on the fens, so many people came to visit them, having heard about the great trial, that life became impossible, and they had decided to escape from Puddleby in this manner, for they had no money to leave any other way and try to find some new place to live where they and their story wouldn't be so well known. But as soon as the ship had begun to roll, Mrs. Luke had got most dreadfully unwell. Poor Luke apologized many times for being such a nuisance and said that the whole thing had been his wife's idea. The doctor, after he had sent below for his medicine bag and had given Mrs. Luke some sal volatile and smelling salts, said he thought the best thing to do would be for him to lend them some money and put them ashore at Penzance with Matthew. He also wrote a letter for Luke to take with him to a friend the doctor had in the town of Penzance who, it was hoped, would be able to find Luke work to do there. As the doctor opened his purse and took out some gold coins, I heard Polynesia, who was sitting on my shoulder watching the whole affair, mutter beneath her breath, "There he goes lending his last blessed penny, £3.10, all the money we had for the whole trip. Now we haven't the price of a postage stamp aboard if we should lose an anchor or have to buy a pint of tar. Well, let's pray we don't run out of food. Why doesn't he give them the ship and walk home?" Presently, with the help of the map, the course of the boat was changed and, to Mrs. Luke's great relief, we made for Penzance and dry land. I was tremendously interested to see how a ship could be steered into a port at night with nothing but lighthouses and a compass to guide you. It seemed to me that the doctor missed all the rocks and sandbars very cleverly. We got into that funny little Cornish harbour about 11 o'clock that night. The doctor took his stowaways on shore in our small rowboat which we kept on the deck of the Curlew and found them rooms at the hotel there. When he got back he told us that Mrs. Luke had gone straight to bed and was feeling much better. It was now after midnight, so we decided to stay in the harbour and wait till morning before setting out again. I was glad to get to bed, although I felt that staying up so tremendously late was great fun. As I climbed into the bunk over the doctor's and pulled the blankets snugly round me, I found I could look out of the porthole at my elbow, and, without raising my head from the pillow, could see the lights of Penzance swinging gently up and down with the motion of the ship at anchor. It was like being rocked to sleep with a little show going on to amuse you. I was just deciding that I liked the life of the sea very much when I fell fast asleep. The 4th chapter. Our troubles continue. The next morning, when we were eating a very excellent breakfast of kidneys and bacon, prepared by our good cook Bumpo, the doctor said to me, "I was just wondering, Stubbins, whether I should stop at the Capablanca Islands or run right across for the coast of Brazil. Miranda said we could expect a spell of excellent weather now for 4.5 weeks at least." "Well," I said, spooning out the sugar at the bottom of my cocoa cup, "I should think it would be best to make straight across while we are sure of good weather. And besides, the purple bird of paradise is going to keep a lookout for us, isn't she? She'll be wondering what's happened to us if we don't get there in about a month." "True, quite true, Stubbins. On the other hand, the Capablancas make a very convenient stopping place on our way across. If we should need supplies or repairs, it would be very handy to put in there." "How long will it take us from here to the Capablancas?" I asked. "About 6 days, said the doctor. "Well, we can decide later. For the next 2 days at any rate our direction would be the same practically in either case. If you have finished breakfast, let's go and get under way." Upstairs I found our vessel surrounded by white and grey seagulls who flashed and circled about in the sunny morning air, looking for food scraps thrown out by the ships into the harbour. By about 7:30 we had the anchor up and the sails set to a nice steady breeze, and this time we got out into the open sea without bumping into a single thing. We met the Penzance fishing fleet coming in from the night's fishing, and very trim and neat they looked, in a line like soldiers, with their red-brown sails all leaning over the same way and the white water dancing before their bows. For the next 3 or 4 days everything went smoothly and nothing unusual happened. During this time we all got settled down into our regular jobs, and in spare moments the doctor showed each of us how to take our turns at the wheel, the proper manner of keeping a ship on her right course, and what to do if the wind changed suddenly. We divided the 24 hours of the day into 3 spells, and we took it in turns to sleep our 8 hours and be awake 16. So the ship was well looked after, with 2 of us always on duty. Besides that, Polynesia, who was an older sailor than any of us, and really knew a lot about running ships, seemed to be always awake except when she took her couple of winks in the sun, standing on one leg beside the wheel. You may be sure that no one ever got a chance to stay abed more than his 8 hours while Polynesia was around. She used to watch the ship's clock, and if you overslept a half minute, she would come down to the cabin and peck you gently on the nose till you got up. I very soon grew to be quite fond of our funny black friend Bumpo, with his grand way of speaking and his enormous feet which someone was always stepping on or falling over. Although he was much older than I was and had been to college, he never tried to lord it over me. He seemed to be forever smiling and kept all of us in good humor. It wasn't long before I began to see the doctor's good sense in bringing him in spite of the fact that he knew nothing whatever about sailing or travel. On the morning of the 5th day out, just as I was taking the wheel over from the doctor, Bumpo appeared and said, "The salt beef is nearly all gone, sir." "The salt beef?" cried the doctor. "Why, we brought 120 pounds with us. We couldn't have eaten that in 5 days. What can have become of it?" "I don't know, sir, I'm sure. Every time I go down to the stores I find another hunk missing. If it is rats that are eating it, then they are certainly colossal rodents." Polynesia, who was walking up and down a stay rope taking her morning exercise, put in, "We must search the hold. If this is allowed to go on we will all be starving before a week is out. Come downstairs with me, Tommy, and we will look into this matter." So we went downstairs into the storeroom and Polynesia told us to keep quite still and listen. This we did. And presently we heard from a dark corner of the hold the distinct sound of someone snoring. "Ah, I thought so," said Polynesia. "It's a man and a big one. Climb in there, both of you, and haul him out. It sounds as though he were behind that barrel. Gosh. We seem to have brought half a puddle by with us. Anyone would think we were a penny ferry boat. Such cheek. Haul him out." So Bumpo and I lit a lantern and climbed over the stores. And there, behind the barrel, sure enough, we found an enormous bearded man fast asleep with a well-fed look on his face. We woke him up. "Washamaru," he said sleepily. It was Ben Butcher, the able seaman. Polynesia spluttered like an angry firecracker. "This is the last straw," said she. "The one man in the world we least wanted. Shiver my timbers, what cheek." "Would it not be advisable," suggested Bumpo, "while the varlet is still sleepy, to strike him on the head with some heavy object and push him through a porthole into the sea?" "No. We'd get into trouble," said Polynesia. "We're not in Jolajinki now, you know, worse luck, besides, there never was a porthole big enough to push that man through. Bring him upstairs to the doctor." So we led the man to the wheel where he respectfully touched his cap to the doctor. "Another stowaway, sir," said Bumpo smartly. "I thought the poor doctor would have a fit." "Good morning, Captain," said the man. "Ben Butcher, able seaman, at your service. I knew you'd need me, so I took the liberty of stowing away much against my conscience." But I just couldn't bear to see you poor landsmen set out on this voyage without a single real seaman to help you. You'd never have got home alive if I hadn't come. Why, look at your mainsail, sir, all loose at the throat. First gust of wind come along, and away goes your canvas overboard. Well, it's all right now I'm here. We'll soon get things in shipshape. No, it isn't all right, said the doctor, it's all wrong. And I'm not at all glad to see you. I told you in Puddleby I didn't want you. You had no right to come. But Captain, said the able seaman, you can't sail this ship without me. You don't understand navigation. Why, look at the compass now, you've let her swing a point and a half off her course. It's madness for you to try to do this trip alone, if you'll pardon my saying so, sir. Why, you'll lose the ship. Look here, said the doctor, a sudden stern look coming into his eyes, losing a ship is nothing to me. I've lost ships before and it doesn't bother me in the least. When I set out to go to a place, I get there. Do you understand? I may know nothing whatever about sailing and navigation, but I get there just the same. Now you may be the best seaman in the world, but on this ship you're just a plain ordinary nuisance, very plain and very ordinary. And I am now going to call at the nearest port and put you ashore. Yes, and think yourself lucky, Polynesia put in, that you are not locked up for stowing away and eating all our salt beef. I don't know what the mischief we're going to do now, I heard her whisper to Bumpo. We've no money to buy any more, and that salt beef was the most important part of the stores. Would it not be good political economy, Bumpo whispered back, if we salted the able seaman and ate him instead? I should judge that he would weigh more than 120 pounds. How often must I tell you that we are not in Jolliginki, snapped Polynesia. Those things are not done on white men's ships still, she murmured after a moment's thought, it's an awfully bright idea. I don't suppose anybody saw him come onto the ship. Oh, but heavens! We haven't got enough salt. Besides, he'd be sure to taste of tobacco. The 5th chapter. Polynesia has a plan. Then the doctor told me to take the wheel while he made a little calculation with his map and worked out what new course we should take. I shall have to run for the Capablancas after all, he told me when the seaman's back was turned. Dreadful nuisance. But I'd sooner swim back to Puddleby than have to listen to that fellow's talk all the way to Brazil. Indeed, he was a terrible person, this Ben Butcher. You'd think that anyone after being told he wasn't wanted would have had the decency to keep quiet. But not Ben Butcher. He kept going round the deck pointing out all the things we had wrong. According to him there wasn't a thing right on the whole ship. The anchor was hitched up wrong, the hatches weren't fastened down properly, the sails were put on back to front, all our knots were the wrong kind of knots. At last the doctor told him to stop talking and go downstairs. He refused, said he wasn't going to be sunk by landlubbers while he was still able to stay on deck. This made us feel a little uneasy. He was such an enormous man, there was no knowing what he might do if he got really obstreperous. Bumpo and I were talking about this downstairs in the dining saloon when Polynesia, Jip, and Chi-Chi came and joined us. And, as usual, Polynesia had a plan. Listen, she said, I am certain this Ben Butcher is a smuggler and a bad man. I am a very good judge of seamen, remember, and I don't like the cut of this man's jib. Do you really think, I interrupted, that it is safe for the doctor to cross the Atlantic without any regular seamen on his ship? You see, it had upset me quite a good deal to find that all the things we had been doing were wrong, and I was beginning to wonder what might happen if we ran into a storm, particularly as Miranda had only said the weather would be good for a certain time, and we seemed to be having so many delays. But Polynesia merely tossed her head scornfully. Oh, bless you, my boy, said she, you're always safe with John Dolittle. Remember that. Don't take any notice of that stupid old salt. Of course it is perfectly true the doctor does do everything wrong. But with him it doesn't matter. Mark my words, if you travel with John Dolittle you always get there, as you heard him say. I've been with him lots of times and I know. Sometimes the ship is upside down when you get there, and sometimes it's right way up. But you get there just the same. And then of course there's another thing about the doctor, she added thoughtfully, he always has extraordinary good luck. He may have his troubles, but with him things seem to have a habit of turning out all right in the end. I remember once when we were going through the Straits of Magellan the wind was so strong, but what are we going to do about Ben Butcher? Jip put in. You had some plan, Polynesia, hadn't you? Yes. What I'm afraid of is that he may hit the doctor on the head when he's not looking and make himself captain of the Curlew. Bad sailors do that sometimes. Then they run the ship their own way and take it where they want. That's what you call a mutiny. Yes, said Jip, and we ought to do something pretty quick. We can't reach the Capablanca before the day after tomorrow at best. I don't like to leave the doctor alone with him for a minute. He smells like a very bad man to me. Well, I've got it all worked out, said Polynesia. Listen, is there a key in that door? We looked outside the dining room and found that there was. All right, said Polynesia. Now Bumpo lays the table for lunch and we all go and hide. Then at 12 o'clock Bumpo rings the dinner bell down here. As soon as Ben hears it he'll come down expecting more salt beef. Bumpo must hide behind the door outside. The moment that Ben is seated at the dining table Bumpo slams the door and locks it. Then we've got him. See? How stratagenius. Bumpo chuckled. As Cicero said, parrots cum parishioners facilime congregation. I'll lay the table at once. Yes, and take that Worcestershire sauce off the dresser with you when you go out, said Polynesia. Don't leave any loose eatables around. That fellow has had enough to last any man for 3 days. Besides, he won't be so inclined to start a fight when we put him ashore at the Capablanca if we thin him down a bit before we let him out. So we all went and hid ourselves in the passage where we could watch what happened. And presently Bumpo came to the foot of the stairs and rang the dinner bell like mad. Then he hopped behind the dining room door and we all kept still and listened. Almost immediately, thump, 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 down the stairs tramped Ben Butcher, the able seaman. He walked into the dining saloon, sat himself down at the head of the table in the doctor's place, tucked a napkin under his fat chin and heaved a sigh of expectation. Then, bang! Bumpo slammed the door and locked it. That settles him for a while, said Polynesia coming out from her hiding place. Now let him teach navigation to the sideboard. Gosh, the cheek of the man. I've forgotten more about the sea than that lumbering lout will ever know. Let's go upstairs and tell the doctor. Bumpo, you will have to serve the meals in the cabin for the next couple of days. And bursting into a rollicking Norwegian sea song, she climbed up to my shoulder and we went on deck. The 6th chapter. The Bedmaker of Monteverde. We remained 3 days in the Capablanca Islands. There were 2 reasons why we stayed there so long when we were really in such a hurry to get away. One was the shortage in our provisions caused by the able seaman's enormous appetite. When we came to go over the stores and make a list, we found that he had eaten a whole lot of other things besides the beef. And having no money, we were sorely puzzled how to buy more. The doctor went through his trunk to see if there was anything he could sell. But the only thing he could find was an old watch with the hands broken and the back dented in, and we decided this would not bring us in enough money to buy much more than a pound of tea. Bumpo suggested that he sing comic songs in the streets which he had learned in Jolliginki. But the doctor said he did not think that the islanders would care for African music. The other thing that kept us was the bullfight. In these islands, which belonged to Spain, they had bullfights every Sunday. It was on a Friday that we arrived there, and after we had got rid of the able seaman we took a walk through the town. It was a very funny little town, quite different from any that I had ever seen. The streets were all twisty and winding and so narrow that a wagon could only just pass along them. The houses overhung at the top and came so close together that people in the attics could lean out of the windows and shake hands with their neighbors on the opposite side of the street. The doctor told us the town was very, very old. It was called Monteverde. As we had no money, of course we did not go to a hotel or anything like that. But on the second evening when we were passing by a bedmaker's shop, we noticed several beds, which the man had made, standing on the pavement outside. The doctor started chatting in Spanish to the bedmaker who was sitting at his door whistling to a parrot in a cage. The doctor and the bedmaker got very friendly, talking about birds and things. And as it grew near to supper time, the man asked us to stop and sup with him. This of course we were very glad to do. And after the meal was over, very nice dishes they were, mostly cooked in olive oil. I particularly liked the fried bananas. We sat outside on the pavement again and went on talking far into the night. At last, when we got up, to go back to our ship, this very nice shopkeeper wouldn't hear of our going away on any account. He said the streets down by the harbor were very badly lighted and there was no moon. We would surely get lost. He invited us to spend the night with him and go back to our ship in the morning. Well, we finally agreed, and as our good friend had no spare bedrooms, the three of us, the doctor, Bumpo and I, slept on the bed set out for sale on the pavement before the shop. The night was so hot we needed no coverings. It was great fun to fall asleep out of doors like this, watching the people walking to and fro and the gay life of the streets. It seemed to me that Spanish people never went to bed at all. Late as it was, all the little restaurants and cafes around us were wide open, with customers drinking coffee and chatting merrily at the small tables outside. The sound of a guitar strumming softly in the distance mingled with the clatter of chinaware and the babble of voices. Somehow it made me think of my mother and father far away in Puddleby, with their regular habits, the evening practice on the flute and the rest doing the same thing every day. I felt sort of sorry for them in a way, because they missed the fun of this traveling life, where we were doing something new all the time, even sleeping differently. But I suppose if they had been invited to go to bed on a pavement in front of a shop, they wouldn't have cared for the idea at all. It is funny how some people are. The 7th chapter. The Doctor's Wager. Next morning we were awakened by a great racket. There was a procession coming down the street, a number of men in very gay clothes followed by a large crowd of admiring ladies and cheering children. I asked the doctor who they were. "They are the bullfighters," he said. "There is to be a bullfight tomorrow." "What is a bullfight?" I asked. To my great surprise, the doctor got red in the face with anger. It reminded me of the time when he had spoken of the lions and tigers in his private zoo. "A bullfight is a stupid, cruel, disgusting business," said he. "These Spanish people are most lovable and hospitable folk. How they can enjoy these wretched bullfights is a thing I could never understand." Then the doctor went on to explain to me how a bull was first made very angry by teasing and then allowed to run into a circus where men came out with red cloaks, waved them at him, and ran away. Next the bull was allowed to tire himself out by tossing and killing a lot of poor, old, broken down horses who couldn't defend themselves. Then, when the bull was thoroughly out of breath and wearied by this, a man came out with a sword and killed the bull. "Every Sunday," said the doctor, "in almost every big town in Spain there are 6 bulls killed like that and as many horses." "But aren't the men ever killed by the bull?" I asked. "Unfortunately very seldom," said he. "A bull is not nearly as dangerous as he looks, even when he's angry, if you are only quick on your feet and don't lose your head. These bullfighters are very clever and nimble. And the people, especially the Spanish ladies, think no end of them. A famous bullfighter, or matador, as they call them, is a more important man in Spain than a king. Here comes another crowd of them round the corner. Look. See the girls throwing kisses to them. Ridiculous business." At that moment our friend the bedmaker came out to see the procession go past. And while he was wishing us good morning and inquiring how we had slept, a friend of his walked up and joined us. The bedmaker introduced this friend to us as Don Enrique Cardenas. Don Enrique, when he heard where we were from, spoke to us in English. He appeared to be a well-educated, gentlemanly sort of person. "And you go to see the bullfight tomorrow, yes?" he asked the doctor pleasantly. "Certainly not," said John Dolittle firmly. "I don't like bullfights, cruel, cowardly shows." Don Enrique nearly exploded. I never saw a man get so excited. He told the doctor that he didn't know what he was talking about. He said bullfighting was a noble sport and that the matadors were the bravest men in the world. "Oh, rubbish," said the doctor. "You never give the poor bull a chance. It is only when he is all tired and dazed that your precious matadors dare to try and kill him." I thought the Spaniard was going to strike the doctor, he got so angry. While he was still spluttering to find words, the bedmaker came between them and took the doctor aside. He explained to John Dolittle in a whisper that this Don Enrique Cardenas was a very important person, that he it was who supplied the bulls a special, strong black kind from his own farm for all the bullfights in the Capablancas. He was a very rich man, the bedmaker said, a most important personage. He mustn't be allowed to take offense on any account. I watched the doctor's face as the bedmaker finished, and I saw a flash of boyish mischief come into his eyes as though an idea had struck him. He turned to the angry Spaniard. "Don Enrique," he said, "you tell me your bullfighters are very brave men and skillful. It seems I have offended you by saying that bullfighting is a poor sport. What is the name of the best matador you have for tomorrow's show?" "Pepito de Malaga," said Don Enrique, "one of the greatest names, one of the bravest men, in all Spain." "Very well," said the doctor, "I have a proposal to make to you. I have never fought a bull in my life. Now supposing I were to go into the ring tomorrow with Pepito de Malaga and any other matadors you choose, and if I can do more tricks with a bull than they can, would you promise to do something for me?" Don Enrique threw back his head and laughed. "Man," he said, "you must be mad. You would be killed at once. One has to be trained for years to become a proper bullfighter. Supposing I were willing to take the risk of that, you are not afraid, I take it, to accept my offer?" The Spaniard frowned. "Afraid?" he cried. "Sir, if you can beat Pepito de Malaga in the bull ring, I'll promise you anything it is possible for me to grant." "Very good," said the doctor, "now I understand that you are quite a powerful man in these islands. If you wished to stop all bullfighting here after tomorrow, you could do it, couldn't you?" "Yes," said Don Enrique proudly, "I could." "Well, that is what I ask of you if I win my wager," said John Dolittle. "If I can do more with angry bulls than can Pepito de Malaga, you are to promise me that there shall never be another bullfight in the Capablancas so long as you are alive to stop it. Is it a bargain?" The Spaniard held out his hand. "It is a bargain," he said, "I promise. But I must warn you that you are merely throwing your life away, for you will certainly be killed. However, that is no more than you deserve for saying that bullfighting is an unworthy sport. I will meet you here tomorrow morning if you should wish to arrange any particulars. Good day, sir." As the Spaniard turned and walked into the shop with the bedmaker, Polynesia, who had been listening as usual, flew up onto my shoulder and whispered in my ear, "I have a plan. Get hold of Bumpo and come someplace where the doctor can't hear us. I want to talk to you." I nudged Bumpo's elbow and we crossed the street and pretended to look into a jeweler's window, while the doctor sat down upon his bed to lace up his boots, the only part of his clothing he had taken off for the night. "Listen," said Polynesia, "I've been breaking my head trying to think up some way we can get money to buy those stores with, and at last I've got it." "The money?" said Bumpo. "No, stupid. The idea to make the money with. Listen, the doctor is simply bound to win this game tomorrow, sure as you're alive. Now all we have to do is to make a side bet with these Spaniards. They regret on gambling and the trick's done." "What's a side bet?" I asked. "Oh, I know what that is," said Bumpo proudly. We used to have lots of them at Oxford when boat racing was on. I go to Don Enrique and say, I bet you £100 the doctor wins. Then if he does win, Don Enrique pays me £100, and if he doesn't, I have to pay Don Enrique. That's the idea, said Polynesia. Only don't say £100, say 2,500 pesetas. Now come and find old Don Ricky Ticky and try to look rich. So we crossed the street again and slipped into the bedmaker's shop while the doctor was still busy with his boots. Don Enrique, said Bumpo, allow me to introduce myself. I am the Crown Prince of Jolijinki. Would you care to have a small bet with me on tomorrow's bullfight? Don Enrique bowed. Why certainly, he said, I shall be delighted. But I must warn you that you are bound to lose. How much? Oh, a mere truffle, said Bumpo, just for the fun of the thing, you know. What do you say to 3,000 pesetas? I agree, said the Spaniard, bowing once more. I will meet you after the bullfight tomorrow. So that's all right, said Polynesia as we came out to join the doctor. I feel as though quite a load had been taken off my mind. The 8th chapter. The Great Bullfight. The next day was a great day in Monteverde. All the streets were hung with flags, and everywhere gaily dressed crowds were to be seen flocking towards the bull ring, as the big circus was called where the fights took place. The news of the doctor's challenge had gone round the town and, it seemed, had caused much amusement to the islanders. The very idea of a mere foreigner daring to match himself against the great Pepito de Malaga, serve him right if he got killed. The doctor had borrowed a bullfighter's suit from Don Enrique, and very gay and wonderful he looked in it, though Bumpo and I had hard work getting the waistcoat to close in front, and even then the buttons kept bursting off it in all directions. When we set out from the harbor to walk to the bull ring, crowds of small boys ran after us making fun of the doctor's fatness, calling out, Juan Hagapoco, El Grosso Matador. Which is the Spanish for, John Dolittle, the fat bullfighter. As soon as we arrived, the doctor said he would like to take a look at the bulls before the fight began, and we were at once led to the bull pen where, behind a high railing, 6 enormous black bulls were tramping around wildly. In a few hurried words and signs the doctor told the bulls what he was going to do and gave them careful instructions for their part of the show. The poor creatures were tremendously glad when they heard that there was a chance of bullfighting being stopped, and they promised to do exactly as they were told. Of course the man who took us in there didn't understand what we were doing. He merely thought the fat Englishman was crazy when he saw the doctor making signs and talking in ox tongue. From there the doctor went to the matadors' dressing rooms while Bumpo and I with Polynesia made our way into the bull ring and took our seats in the great open-air theater. It was a very gay sight. Thousands of ladies and gentlemen were there, all dressed in their smartest clothes, and everybody seemed very happy and cheerful. Right at the beginning Don Enrique got up and explained to the people that the first item on the program was to be a match between the English doctor and Pepito de Malaga. He told them what he had promised if the doctor should win. But the people did not seem to think there was much chance of that. A roar of laughter went up at the very mention of such a thing. When Pepito came into the ring everybody cheered, the ladies blew kisses and the men clapped and waved their hats. Presently a large door on the other side of the ring was rolled back and in galloped one of the bulls, then the door was closed again. At once the matador became very much on the alert. He waved his red cloak and the bull rushed at him. Pepito stepped nimbly aside and the people cheered again. This game was repeated several times. But I noticed that whenever Pepito got into a tight place and seemed to be in real danger from the bull, an assistant of his, who always hung around somewhere near, drew the bull's attention upon himself by waving another red cloak. Then the bull would chase the assistant and Pepito was left in safety. Most often, as soon as he had drawn the bull off, this assistant ran for the high fence and vaulted out of the ring to save himself. They evidently had it all arranged, these matadors, and it didn't seem to me that they were in any very great danger from the poor clumsy bull so long as they didn't slip and fall. After about 10 minutes of this kind of thing, the small door into the matador's dressing room opened and the doctor strolled into the ring. As soon as his fat figure, dressed in sky blue velvet, appeared, the crowd rocked in their seats with laughter. Juan Hagapoco, as they had called him, walked out into the center of the ring and bowed ceremoniously to the ladies in the boxes. Then he bowed to the bull. Then he bowed to Pepito. While he was bowing to Pepito's assistant, the bull started to rush at him from behind. "Look out! Look out!" dashed the bull. "You will be killed!" yelled the crowd. But the doctor calmly finished his bow. Then turning round, he folded his arms, fixed the onrushing bull with his eye and frowned a terrible frown. Presently a curious thing happened. The bull's speed got slower and slower. It almost looked as though he were afraid of that frown. Soon he stopped altogether. The doctor shook his finger at him. He began to tremble. At last, tucking his tail between his legs, the bull turned round and ran away. The crowd gasped. The doctor ran after him. Round and round the ring they went, both of them puffing and blowing like grampuses. Excited whispers began to break out among the people. This was something new in bullfighting, to have the bull running away from the man, instead of the man away from the bull. At last, in the 10th lap, with a final burst of speed, Juan Hagapoco, the English matador, caught the poor bull by the tail. Then, leading the now timid creature into the middle of the ring, the doctor made him do all manner of tricks, standing on the hind legs, standing on the front legs, dancing, hopping, rolling over. He finished up by making the bull kneel down. Then he got onto his back and did handsprings and other acrobatics on the beast's horns. Pepito and his assistant had their noses sadly out of joint. The crowd had forgotten them entirely. They were standing together by the fence not far from where I sat, muttering to one another and slowly growing green with jealousy. Finally the doctor turned towards Don Enrique's seat and bowing said in a loud voice, "This bull is no good any more. He's terrified and out of breath. Take him away, please." "Does the caballero wish for a fresh bull?" asked Don Enrique. "No," said the doctor, "I want 5 fresh bulls. And I would like them all in the ring at once, please." At this a cry of horror burst from the people. They had been used to seeing matadors escaping from one bull at a time. But 5, that must mean certain death. Pepito sprang forward and called to Don Enrique not to allow it, saying it was against all the rules of bullfighting. "Ha! Polynesia chuckled into my ear. It's like the doctor's navigation, he breaks all the rules, but he gets there. If they'll only let him, he'll give them the best show for their money they ever saw." A great argument began. Half the people seemed to be on Pepito's side and half on the doctor's side. At last the doctor turned to Pepito and made another very grand bow which burst the last button off his waistcoat. "Well, of course if the caballero is afraid," he began with a bland smile. "Afraid?" screamed Pepito. "I am afraid of nothing on earth. I am the greatest matador in Spain. With this right hand I have killed 957 bulls." "All right then," said the doctor, "let us see if you can kill 5 more. Let the bulls in," he shouted. Pepito de Malaga is not afraid. A dreadful silence hung over the great theater as the heavy door into the bull pen was rolled back. Then with a roar the 5 big bulls bounded into the ring. "Look fierce," I heard the doctor call to them in cattle language. "Don't scatter. Keep close. Get ready for a rush. Take Pepito, the one in purple, first. But for heaven's sake don't kill him. Just chase him out of the ring now then, all together, go for him." The bulls put down their heads and all in line, like a squadron of cavalry, charged across the ring straight for poor Pepito. For one moment the Spaniard tried his hardest to look brave. But the sight of the 5 pairs of horns coming at him at full gallop was too much. He turned white to the lips, ran for the fence, vaulted it and disappeared. "Now the other one," the doctor hissed. and in 2 seconds the gallant assistant was nowhere to be seen. Juan Hagapoco, the fat matador, was left alone in the ring with 5 rampaging bulls. The rest of the show was really well worth seeing. First, all 5 bulls went raging round the ring, butting at the fence with their horns, pawing up the sand, hunting for something to kill. Then each one in turn would pretend to catch sight of the doctor for the first time and, giving a bellow of rage, would lower his wicked-looking horns and shoot like an arrow across the ring as though he meant to toss him to the sky. It was really frightfully exciting. And even I, who knew it was all arranged beforehand, held my breath in terror for the doctor's life when I saw how near they came to sticking him. But just at the last moment, when the horns' points were 2 inches from the sky-blue waistcoat, the doctor would spring nimbly to one side and the great brutes would go thundering harmlessly by, missing him by no more than a hair. Then all 5 of them went for him together, completely surrounding him, slashing at him with their horns and bellowing with fury. How he escaped alive I don't know. For several minutes his round figure could hardly be seen at all in that scrimmage of tossing heads, stamping hoofs and waving tails. It was, as Polynesia had prophesied, the greatest bullfight ever seen. One woman in the crowd got quite hysterical and screamed up to Don Enrique, "Stop the fight! Stop the fight! He is too brave a man to be killed. This is the most wonderful matador in the world. Let him live! Stop the fight!" But presently the doctor was seen to break loose from the mob of animals that surrounded him. Then, catching each of them by the horns, one after another, he would give their heads a sudden twist and throw them down flat on the sand. The great fellows acted their parts extremely well. I have never seen trained animals in a circus do better. They lay there panting on the ground where the doctor threw them as if they were exhausted and completely beaten. Then, with a final bow to the ladies, John Dolittle took a cigar from his pocket, lit it and strolled out of the ring. The 9th chapter. We depart in a hurry. As soon as the door closed behind the doctor, the most tremendous noise I have ever heard broke loose. Some of the men appeared to be angry, friends of Pepito's, I suppose, but the ladies called and called to have the doctor come back into the ring. When at length he did so, the women seemed to go entirely mad over him. They blew kisses to him. They called him a darling. Then they started taking off their flowers, their rings, their necklaces, and their brooches and threw them down at his feet. You never saw anything like it, a perfect shower of jewelry and roses. But the doctor just smiled up at them, bowed once more and backed out. "Now, Bumpo," said Polynesia, "this is where you go down and gather up all those trinkets and we'll sell 'em. That's what the big matadors do, leave the jewelry on the ground and their assistants collect it for them. We might as well lay in a good supply of money while we've got the chance. You never know when you may need it when you're traveling with the doctor. Never mind the roses, you can leave them, but don't leave any rings. And when you've finished, go and get your 3,000 pesetas out of Don Ricky Tiki. Tommy and I will meet you outside and we'll pawn the jagas at that juice shop opposite the bed makers. Run along and not a word to the doctor, remember." Outside the bull ring we found the crowd still in a great state of excitement. Violent arguments were going on everywhere. Bumpo joined us with his pockets bulging in all directions, and we made our way slowly through the dense crowd to that side of the building where the matador's dressing room was. The doctor was waiting at the door for us. "Good work, doctor," said Polynesia, flying onto his shoulder. "Great work, but listen, I smell danger. I think you had better get back to the ship now as quick and as quietly as you can. Put your overcoat on over that giddy suit. I don't like the looks of this crowd. More than half of them are furious because you've won. Don Ricky Tiki must now stop the bullfighting, and you know how they love it. What I'm afraid of is that some of these matadors who are just mad with jealousy may start some dirty work. I think this would be a good time for us to get away." "I dare say you're right, Polynesia," said the doctor. "You usually are. The crowd does seem to be a bit restless. I'll slip down to the ship alone so I shan't be so noticeable, and I'll wait for you there. You come by some different way." but don't be long about it. Hurry. As soon as the doctor had departed, Bumpo sought out Don Enrique and said, "Honorable sir, you owe me 3,000 pesetas." Without a word, but looking cross-eyed with annoyance, Don Enrique paid his bet. We next set out to buy the provisions, and on the way we hired a cab and took it along with us. Not very far away we found a big grocer's shop which seemed to sell everything to eat. We went in and bought up the finest lot of food you ever saw in your life. As a matter of fact, Polynesia had been right about the danger we were in. The news of our victory must have spread like lightning through the whole town. For as we came out of the shop and loaded the cab up with our stores, we saw various little knots of angry men hunting round the streets, waving sticks and shouting, "The Englishmen! Where are those accursed Englishmen who stopped the bullfighting? Hang them to a lamp post, throw them in the sea. The Englishmen, we want the Englishmen." After that we didn't waste any time, you may be sure. Bumpo grabbed the Spanish cab driver and explained to him in signs that if he didn't drive down to the harbor as fast as he knew how and keep his mouth shut the whole way, he would choke the life out of him. Then we jumped into the cab on top of the food, slammed the door, pulled down the blinds and away we went. "We won't get a chance to pawn the jewelry now," said Polynesia, as we bumped over the cobbly streets. "But never mind, it may come in handy later on. And anyway we've got 2,500 pesetas left out of the bet. Don't give the cabbie more than 2 pesetas 50, Bumpo. That's the right fare, I know." Well, we reached the harbor all right, and we were mighty glad to find that the doctor had sent Chi-Chi back with the rowboat to wait for us at the landing wall. Unfortunately, while we were in the middle of loading the supplies from the cab into the boat, the angry mob arrived upon the wharf and made a rush for us. Bumpo snatched up a big beam of wood that lay near and swung it round and round his head, letting out dreadful African battle yells the while. This kept the crowd off while Chi-Chi and I hustled the last of the stores into the boat and clambered in ourselves. Bumpo threw his beam of wood into the thick of the Spaniards and leapt in after us. Then we pushed off and rode like mad for the Curlew. The mob upon the wall howled with rage, shook their fists and hurled stones and all manner of things after us. Poor old Bumpo got hit on the head with a bottle. But as he had a very strong head, it only raised a small bump while the bottle smashed into 1,000 pieces. When we reached the ship's side, the doctor had the anchor drawn up and the sails set and everything in readiness to get away. Looking back, we saw boats coming out from the harbor wall after us, filled with angry, shouting men. So we didn't bother to unload our rowboat but just tied it onto the ship's stern with a rope and jumped aboard. It only took a moment more to swing the Curlew round into the wind, and soon we were speeding out of the harbor on our way to Brazil. "Ha!" sighed Polynesia, as we all flopped down on the deck to take a rest and get our breath. "That wasn't a bad adventure, quite reminds me of my old seafaring days when I sailed with the smugglers. Golly, that was the life. Never mind your head, Bumpo. It will be all right when the doctor puts a little arnica on it. Think what we got out of the scrap, a boatload of ship's stores, pockets full of jewelry and thousands of pesetas. Not bad, not bad."